Hello and welcome. My name is Eric Farewell and welcome back to the Aviator Show. Last week we saw some absolutely awesome flying coast to coast on the new Vittorazi EFI. And this week we're gonna dive into just what Vittorazi did to make this engine so efficient, so freaking smooth, and so easy to start. I've been flying this motor and I have to say, I'm giddy about it because it's the first time I've had a single button push start in almost a decade. And it's just downright fun. There's no weird spots in the power band. It's everything a paramotor engine should be. I love the thing, and I think you will too. So let's jump right into it. Here's Neil, right here on the Aviator Show.
Clear. I want to do a 30-hour review of the Moster EFI. We have currently 33 and a half hours on it right now, and I think I've put probably at least 23 or 24 of those hours myself. Just want to discuss some of the things that I like about it, that I don't like about it, address some of the questions, comments, concerns, and ideas that we've had in the comments as well for all this video series that we've been doing on the EFI. First and foremost, why EFI on a two-stroke paramotor? Diaphragm carburetor seems to be just fine, right? Well, it works. Diaphragm carburetor works honestly, until you fly the EFI and put a bit of seat time on it. That's when you start to see the shortcomings of the diaphragm carburetor. For instance, when I go out to the field, when we do our evening flight sessions, typically, if there's 5 people there flying, I'll have to adjust at least one carburetor on the way out to fly myself. It's like without fail every time. And that's kind of one of the realizations that I had the other day, how user-friendly this is potentially going to be. It's what I believe anyway. EFI on two-strokes has been around since the early 90s. I believe Polaris was the first one to do it on snowmobiles, and boats more in the early 2000s, I believe. This is from the research that I've done on it. Somebody can correct me if I'm wrong in the comments, but I believe Mercury did it in early 2000s, something like that. So it's been in the works for a long time, especially with snowmobiles. They're going up and down different altitudes, mountain sleds and powder sleds, and that they're going to be changing their altitude a lot. So with a snowmobile platform, you could afford a few extra pounds worth of EFI gear. It didn't matter so much. So that was kind of the test bed of that. And then in 2018, when KTM debuted the TPI on their dirt bikes, that changed everything. Yamaha, for instance, they've been making their two-stroke dirt bikes for a few years, since I think the latest generation on the YZ250 is 15, 20 years old at this point. They just keep making the same thing. And you go to any off-road riding area, you can see the difference. Tons of people on KTM two-strokes and barely anybody on Yamaha anymore. And you kind of see how outdated they are. Once you kind of take a step back and kind of understand all that it's doing, it's actually fairly simple, other than the mapping and that. The mapping is fairly complicated. You have, for instance, on the EFI here, you have an EGT probe, so exhaust gas temperature probe. That's measuring how hot that exhaust gas is. It's coming out the cylinder. You have a cylinder head temperature gauge, so CHT. That's measuring how hot the cylinder head is. And then there's an ambient air pressure sensor. That's it as far as this system goes. This system has nothing to do with the ignition system other than starting and stopping the engine. So that takes out a lot of additional complexity, because the ignition system on these Mosters and Atoms are super reliable. It's very, very rare that the coil goes or something like that. And that's really all that's ever going to go on that type of ignition system, is the coil, which is pretty rare on those. Why EFI on a paramotor? Prime example is you start at sea level and you may want to go to 10,000 feet or something like that. You're going to have a perfectly tuned engine all the way up from the ground, all the way up 10,000 feet, and then back down. It's ready to rock and roll the whole time. Another case, what I really see this system being amazing at, is for that guy or gal that travels with their paramotor a lot, going to all these different areas here, and that's not if that person's not super mechanically inclined, you're going to pull that motor out of your van or your camper or whatever the case may be, set it up, and go fly in Utah one day. Then maybe the next day you're down at California and sea level, and you go fly there. You're going to hit the button, it's going to start, and it's going to run perfect every time. That's really what especially for the first few years, that's really where I see this being super, super advantageous to a lot of people, and it just runs. That's really the main thing that I can describe the EFI is it just runs. A lot of people in the comments were kind of making the statement of, you know, why all these videos about efficiency? Well, it's hard for me to translate through a video how smooth the engine runs. So we were just having fun playing around. We did some data points and everything with it. We're not Project Farm, man. Project Farm is the only dude on YouTube that has been able to beat the YouTube scientists, and he puts a ton of time and money into all of his reviews of tools and that. So strictly for fun, get a little bit of data and everything, but this thing consistently was more economical than anything we put it up against with any sort of combination. Didn't matter what we did. The only time that was pretty close with this and another Moster was when me and Reese were running from Wauchula to Lake Wales. Turns out I was actually having a little bit of trouble with the EFI system. Between like 5,000, 5,500 RPM, I was getting a lot of hesitation and stumble. And what's nice about the EFI is I sent the telemetry to Vittorazi. They sent me data back, told me exactly how to correct the issue with it. I just had to change the fuel pump value a little bit and got the EGT back where it's supposed to be, and it's been flawless ever since. So that's honestly really the only trouble that we've had in 33 hours was that little bit of mid-range stumble. So, and then after we corrected that, it's just been average 2.5 liters an hour. It's nonstop under 3 liters an hour. But anyway, that's really the tangible thing that we can put through video out to you is the efficiency of it. There's really a lot of other advantages to the EFI system, and there's going to be a lot of people that fly it once and they think, oh, well, you know, it's a smoother Moster, what's the big deal? And that's exactly what my initial reaction was to it, was it's a smoother Moster, what's the big deal? I don't see why it's worth that much more. Putting 5 hours on it or whatever really started to appreciate how much better it really is. It's hard to describe it. You just feel it behind your back running, like you're at cruise or something, and it just, like I hit the start button on it now, and it's just like, God, I want one of these things. As soon as I start it up, it's just like, ugh, it's just so much better. It's hard to convey that through video sometimes, but it's just so much better. Electric fuel injection has been around since, it's been mainstream in daily life since the early 80s in cars, right? People said the same things when all these electric fuel injection cars started coming out. Well, I can fix my carburetor on the side of the road with a screwdriver, and it's simpler, it's easier. Cars are far more reliable than they used to be. My car is 50 years old, trust me. I like old cars, but newer stuff with fuel injection is far more reliable. Seeing it in person, seeing how much effort has gone into it, and seeing what it actually is in person, it started to make more sense. And then, you know, people got to understand too, the paramotor world, we do not sell a lot of volume. KTM TBI bikes, they're making 30,000 a year, something like that. And they sell 300,000, over 300,000 motorcycles a year. So their R&D budget is a lot bigger. Their production volume is obviously tremendously bigger. And I think that kind of gets lost on translation with people. Like, one of the comments was like, oh, I can get a small block Chevy with 400 horsepower built down the street for less money than that. They've been around for 80 years. Yeah, they're cheap. You can get them at the junkyard. Like, you're not getting that at the junkyard. You're not going to build this in your shop. Like, this, it's small volume, and they've invested millions of dollars into this. So yeah. Another thing that I saw a couple of times in the YouTube comments as well, why don't they just use a smart carb? That seems to make more sense to me. Well, metering rod carbs have been around since the mid-1960s. If the metering rod carb was truly better, that would have been the industry standard on anything with any single cylinder with a carburetor since the 1980s, but it isn't. It hasn't. If that's the superior technology, it's had 40 years to prove itself, and it hasn't. So I think that EFI obviously is proving itself, and it's becoming more and more prevalent on any internal combustion engine that exists right now. With the battery that's on it right now, they say 7 hours, and I would say it's probably a pretty conservative estimate. When I landed after 4 hours with the Cross Florida ride, I think I had 55%, something like that. I think you could probably, I think 7 hours is a pretty safe estimate on it. And when these go into production, they're going to have the ability to go parallel with them. So you can have 2 of these batteries. So potentially 14 hours of runtime. I've been hammering this point home the whole time. The first time that I flew it, I was not blown away with it. And I think there's going to be a lot of people that fly it once, maybe their buddy has one, or they get the opportunity to demo one, fly it for an hour or something like that, and yeah, it's nice, but it's not worth, you know, whatever. So there's going to be a lot of that. You know, if you got a cool friend or somebody that's a dealer or whatever that will let you borrow it for a couple of days, like a weekend at a fly-in or something like that, where you can really put a few hours on it and get some good seat time on it, I think you'll really start to come to appreciate what it is. On top of that, I really believe the reliability of this is going to be a pretty significant improvement over what else is available right now. It's going to be such a huge boost to a lot of newer pilots that aren't super mechanically inclined. They can just pull their motor out of the van, set it up, hit the button, and go fly.
All right, well, I hope you've enjoyed the EFI series here. I hope you've learned something. I hope you've discovered new things. It's pretty exciting times to be in the paramotor world right now. If you go to the AviatorPPG.com, we have a Moster EFI landing webpage where you can get your name on the list to get one of these bad boys. I highly recommend you do. This is super, super awesome and exciting. Like, comment, subscribe, share, and this is Neil from Aviator. Peace out.